In the heart of the Amazon, beneath trees that have stood for centuries, lies a mystery written in earth itself. Soil so black it absorbs light, so fertile it has grown crops continuously for over 2,000 years, so chemically stable that carbon dating reveals it defies the very laws of decomposition we thought governed all organic matter. Modern laboratories, armed with electron microscopes and mass spectrometers, have analyzed every molecule. Agricultural corporations have invested millions attempting to recreate it. Soil scientists have spent careers studying its composition. They have all failed. This is Terra Preta, the dark earth, and it represents something we are only beginning to understand. Ancient people possessed knowledge of ecological engineering so sophisticated that our entire scientific establishment cannot reproduce it. The question is not simply what we lost. The question is why. Terra Preta appears across the Amazon basin like archaeological breadcrumbs, scattered patches of impossibly rich soil in a landscape where fertility should be fleeting. The Amazon, for all its lush appearance, grows atop some of the poorest soil on Earth. Heavy rains leach nutrients within months. Natural decomposition is so rapid that fallen leaves vanish in weeks. The jungle's abundance is an illusion, a closed loop where nutrients cycle through living biomass but never accumulate in the ground itself. Yet here, in discrete locations spanning thousands of square kilometers, the rules change. Terra Preta soil measures up to 2 meters deep. Its carbon content reaches 15% compared to 0.5% in surrounding soils. It contains phosphorus levels 3 times higher than adjacent Earth. Calcium, magnesium, and potassium concentrations define natural accumulation patterns. Pottery fragments embed themselves throughout, alongside charcoal particles so finely structured they appear engineered rather than burned. But the true mystery lies in what happens when you disturb it. Conventional soil, once depleted, requires decades to recover. Industrial agriculture exhausts ground within years, necessitating constant chemical intervention. Terra Preta regenerates. Farmers have harvested it for commercial topsoil for over a century, removing truckloads to sell in cities. The patches grow back. 20 centimeters excavated return within a decade. The soil rebuilds itself. Carbon dating reveals these soils range from 500 to over 2,000 years old. Yet their organic matter shows minimal decomposition. Tropical conditions should have reduced it to nothing within years. Instead, the carbon persists in a form so stable it could theoretically last millennia more. Scientists call this recalcitrant carbon, matter that resists breakdown through mechanisms we still cannot fully explain. Terra Preta is not dirt, it is architecture. Molecular architecture built by people we have systematically underestimated for centuries. To understand Terra Preta, we must first dismantle our assumptions about who built it. For generations, Western scholarship portrayed the Amazon as pristine wilderness, sparsely populated by small nomadic groups who left no lasting mark. This narrative served colonial purposes, suggesting the land was empty, waiting for European civilization. Archaeological evidence now tells a radically different story. Between 450 BCE and 950 CE, indigenous Amazonians developed complex societies, supporting populations that may have numbered in the millions. They built geometric earthworks visible only from the air, constructed causeways spanning kilometers, managed forest composition across vast territories, and engineered soil that would outlast their civilizations by 1,000 years. The builders of Terra Preta were not accidental composters. They were ecological engineers working within sophisticated knowledge systems passed through generations. Their settlements centered around communal areas where organic waste concentrated naturally. Food preparation sites, living quarters, ceremonial grounds. But what happened to this waste was not abandonment, it was transformation. Pottery shards, too broken for use, were crushed and incorporated. Fish bones, rich in phosphorus and calcium, were ground and mixed. Plant matter was not simply discarded, but combined with specific materials. And charcoal, produced not from random fires but through controlled pyrolysis, was added in quantities and frequencies that suggest intentional design. The charcoal itself reveals careful technique. Modern analysis shows it was created through low oxygen burning, producing biochar with specific pore structures. These microscopic cavities, measuring nanometers across, create surface areas exceeding 500 square meters per gram. They trap nutrients. They house beneficial microorganisms. They retain water during drought and prevent nutrient leaching during floods. Someone understood this. Without electron microscopes, without chemistry textbooks. Through observation, experimentation, and accumulated wisdom, indigenous Amazonians discovered principles of soil science we are only now rediscovering. Their farming systems complemented this soil engineering. They practiced what we now call agroforestry, integrating dozens of useful species in ways that mimicked and enhanced natural forest structure. Fruit trees provided canopy. Nitrogen-fixing plants enriched soil. Ground cover prevented erosion. Terra Preta beds, built through years of careful addition, became permanent gardens requiring no clearing, no burning, no soil exhaustion. This was not primitive agriculture. This was sustainable intensification, achieving productivity that supported dense populations without destroying the ecological foundations on which they depended. Their worldview, reconstructed through anthropological work with descendant communities, understood humans as participants in natural cycles, not dominators of nature. The goal was not extraction, but participation, not conquest, but relationship. The soil they built was both practical technology and philosophical statement. We can enhance the world we live in. Terra Preta did not appear in one location. It spread. Archaeological surveys have identified over 300 sites containing dark earth, distributed across the Amazon basin from Ecuador to Brazil, from the southern tributaries to the northern reaches. The distribution suggests not isolated invention, but shared knowledge, cultural exchange, perhaps even trade networks connecting distant communities. Some sites span single hectares, small household gardens maintained across generations. Others extend for hundreds of hectares, evidence of settlements supporting thousands of people. The largest documented Terra Preta site covers over 500 hectares, suggesting an urban complexity scholars once deemed impossible in Amazonian environments. These populations thrived in what modern agriculture considers marginal land. The soils beneath the Amazon are ancient, weathered, acidic, depleted by millions of years of rainfall. Industrial farming here requires massive chemical inputs and typically fails within decades. Yet ancient Amazonians built permanent agricultural systems that supported sophisticated societies for over a millennium. Recent botanical surveys reveal the Amazon itself bears their fingerprint. The distribution of useful species, Brazil nut trees, cacao, palms, shows patterns too concentrated to be natural. These forests are not pristine wilderness. They are ancient gardens, still producing centuries after their gardeners disappeared. Terra Preta sites correlate with elevated concentrations of domesticated species, suggesting the soil engineering was part of broader landscape modification. This challenges our fundamental understanding of the Amazon. The world's largest rainforest is not untouched nature. It is, in significant part, a human artifact. The wilderness colonizers encountered was actually a managed landscape whose managers had recently vanished. Between 1492 and 1650, the indigenous population of the Americas declined by an estimated 90%. The Amazon did not escape this catastrophe. European diseases, smallpox, measles, influenza, spread faster than the colonizers themselves. Communities that had never seen a European died from pathogens carried along trade routes. Populations collapsed before written records could document their existence. By the time explorers penetrated the Amazon's interior, they found sparse populations in what had recently been densely inhabited lands. The societies that built Terra Preta did not simply disappear. They were dismantled through epidemic disease, colonial violence, enslavement, and forced displacement. Survivors fled into remote areas or were absorbed into colonial economies. Knowledge systems maintained through oral tradition, through practice, through intergenerational teaching were severed. Elders died before passing on their understanding. Children never learned the techniques their grandparents had perfected. The soil remained. The knowledge did not. Early European observers encountering Terra Preta misunderstood it entirely. Some attributed it to volcanic activity. Others suggested it was natural humus accumulation. None conceived that indigenous people could have engineered it. The possibility did not fit their framework, which positioned native populations as primitive and incapable of sophisticated technology. This blindness was not merely ignorance, it was ideological. Recognizing advanced indigenous ecological engineering would have complicated colonial narratives about civilizing empty wilderness. So the evidence was explained away, filed under curiosities, or ignored entirely. For centuries, Terra Preta existed as an acknowledged phenomenon with no accepted explanation. The soil was there. Its properties were documented, but the idea that it represented deliberate technology created by people whose descendants still lived in the region remained unconsidered. By the time Western science developed sufficient sophistication to recognize Terra Preta as engineered, the cultures that created it had been suppressed for 400 years. The knowledge was not preserved in books. It lived in practice, in the daily work of communities who no longer existed as they had. Fragments survived among descendant populations, but the full system, the complete understanding, was gone. We did not lose Terra Preta. We destroyed the people who made it. In the 1960s, soil scientist Wim Sombroek conducted the first systematic analysis of Terra Preta, documenting its chemical properties and proposing it as anthropogenic. His work initiated decades of research attempting to decode its composition and replicate its properties. The science is both revealing and humbling. At the molecular level, Terra Preta's stability derives primarily from its biochar content. Biochar is not ordinary charcoal. It is organic matter heated in low oxygen conditions, a process called pyrolysis, which transforms plant structures into carbon-rich matrices that resist decomposition. The resulting material has a porous architecture, honeycomb structures at the microscopic level, providing massive surface area for chemical reactions and microbial colonization. This porosity creates what scientists call cation exchange capacity, the soil's ability to hold and release nutrients. Normal Amazonian soil has minimal cation exchange capacity. Terra Preta's measures 10 to 20 times higher. Nutrients that would wash away in rain events remain available to plants. Fertilizers applied centuries ago still contribute to fertility today. But biochar alone does not create Terra Preta. Modern experiments adding pure biochar to soil show improvement, but not transformation. Something else is required. That something is biological. Terra Preta contains microbial communities distinct from surrounding soils. Bacterial and fungal populations show elevated diversity and different functional compositions. These microorganisms mediate nutrient cycling, break down organic matter in specific ways, form symbiotic relationships with plant roots, and maintain soil structure. They are not passive inhabitants. They are active participants in the soil's functionality. Here is where modern replication attempts falter. You can mix biochar with compost, you can add bone meal for phosphorus, wood ash for potassium, crushed pottery for minerals. You can water it, plant in it, tend it for years. The result will be improved soil. It will not be Terra Preta. The microbial communities in Terra Preta are not simply diverse. They are specific. They exist in relationships built over generations, ecosystems within ecosystems, functioning in ways we are only beginning to map. You cannot inoculate soil with these microbes and expect them to establish. They require conditions built gradually through processes we cannot shortcut. Multiple research teams have attempted controlled Terra Preta creation. They follow protocols derived from archaeological analysis: low-temperature charcoal, organic matter addition, mineral supplementation, extended aging periods. Results show improvement over baseline soil. They do not show the self-regenerating fertility, the carbon stability, the complete transformation that characterizes authentic Terra Preta. Something is missing. Perhaps it is time. Terra Preta sites developed over centuries, with gradual additions allowing microbial succession, soil structure development, and chemical stabilization that cannot be accelerated. Perhaps it is technique. The exact temperatures of charcoal production, the sequence of additions, the seasonal timing, details lost when knowledge systems collapsed. Perhaps it is ecological context. Terra Preta existed within specific Amazonian ecosystems, with regional microorganisms, rainfall patterns, and vegetation that modern experiments cannot perfectly replicate. Or perhaps it is this: knowledge embedded in practice cannot be fully extracted through analysis. Science can describe what exists. It cannot always reconstruct how to make it exist. Modern agriculture developed along a different path entirely. The Green Revolution of the mid-20th century prioritized productivity through chemical inputs, mechanization, and genetic selection. It fed billions and prevented predicted famines. It also established a model fundamentally incompatible with Terra Preta's logic. Industrial farming treats soil as medium, not ecosystem. It is substance to hold plants upright while chemical fertilizers provide nutrition. Biological complexity is irrelevant, even inconvenient. Soil life interferes with chemical predictability. Diversity complicates mechanization. The goal is control, standardization, efficiency measured in yields per hectare per season. Terra Preta represents the opposite philosophy. It treats soil as a living system, building biological complexity that generates fertility internally. It requires time, accepts variability, measures success across generations rather than seasons. It cannot be mechanized easily. It cannot be applied uniformly across vast monocultures. It does not fit quarterly earnings reports. The economic pressures are clear. Chemical fertilizers provide immediate results. Biochar requires production infrastructure and years to show full benefits. Petroleum-based agriculture can be implemented at scale with existing equipment. Terra Preta approaches require site-specific management and ecological knowledge. One model generates profit for agrochemical corporations. The other distributes benefits to farmers while threatening established supply chains. This is not conspiracy. It is economics. Industrial agriculture evolved to serve industrial society. Concentrated production, long supply chains, urban populations disconnected from food sources. Terra Preta evolved to serve rooted communities managing local landscapes across generations. Different contexts, different solutions. But the divergence has costs. Industrial methods applied to tropical soils fail predictably. Clearing forests for agriculture exposes ground to intense rainfall. Without forest cover, erosion removes topsoil within years. Chemical inputs leach into groundwater. Soil biology collapses. Within a decade, productivity declines. The response is more chemicals, accelerating degradation, until the land is abandoned and new forest is cleared. The Amazon loses forest area equal to small European countries annually, much of it for agriculture that will fail within years. Meanwhile, Terra Preta sites, some abandoned for 500 years, could be farmed tomorrow. We also lost carbon sequestration potential we desperately need now. Terra Preta locks carbon into soil for millennia. Global topsoil contains more carbon than atmosphere and vegetation combined, but most soil carbon cycles rapidly. Stable soil carbon, like that in Terra Preta, represents actual atmospheric carbon removal. If even a fraction of agricultural land incorporated biochar at Terra Preta proportions, it could offset meaningful percentages of global emissions. But we don't, because we lost the knowledge, because we built systems that ignore it, because we conquered the people who could have taught us and called it progress. Knowledge does not vanish completely. It hibernates. In recent decades, researchers began collaborating with indigenous communities whose ancestors built Terra Preta. Fragments of traditional knowledge persisted, incorporated into contemporary practices or preserved in oral histories. Combined with archaeological and soil science, these fragments are being reconstructed into working methods. In the Brazilian Amazon, projects are teaching biochar production to farming communities. Simple kilns, requiring no electricity or industrial equipment, produce charcoal through controlled pyrolysis. Mixed with compost and applied to degraded land, results show significant fertility improvements within years. Full Terra Preta properties develop slower, but the trajectory is promising. In areas where soil has been exhausted by conventional farming, biochar applications are reversing degradation. Water retention improves, microbial populations recover, crops grow with reduced fertilizer. The land begins healing itself as Terra Preta has always done. These are not laboratory experiments. They are working farms, producing food, supporting families, demonstrating that ancient principles can address modern problems. Interest has spread globally. Biochar projects now operate across Africa, Asia, Latin America, addressing soil degradation, food insecurity, and climate change simultaneously. The approach adapts to local conditions, using regional biomass and traditional knowledge where it exists. It is not imposing Amazonian techniques elsewhere. It is applying Amazonian principles, showing what becomes possible when we treat soil as living system rather than inert medium. Scientists are conducting multi-decade studies, creating experimental Terra Preta and monitoring its development. Early results confirm what ancient Amazonians knew. The soil improves over time. Year 5 shows better fertility than Year 1. Year 15 exceeds Year 5. The trajectory suggests that in another generation, these experimental plots may exhibit the self-regenerating properties we still cannot fully explain. The revival is not limited to rural agriculture. Urban projects are using biochar in community gardens, transforming contaminated or depleted urban soil. Rooftop farms, school gardens, vacant lot transformations. Terra Preta principles scale down as well as up, applicable wherever people want to grow food sustainably. Perhaps most importantly, indigenous communities are reclaiming their role as knowledge holders. For centuries, they were positioned as remnants of the past, obstacles to development. Now, they are recognized as experts in sustainable land management, consulted by scientists, invited to conferences, teaching techniques that could help address global challenges. This is not romanticization. It is recognition. The people whose ancestors built soil that still produces after 2,000 years have something to teach civilizations struggling with soil degradation after decades. There is a photograph taken from satellite showing the Amazon basin. Scattered across the darkness are pinpoints of light, cities and towns. But there is another map, invisible to satellites, written in Earth itself. Terra Preta sites, hundreds of them, marking places where complex societies once thrived. The lights moved, the soil remained. We call Terra Preta a lost technology, but that is not precisely accurate. The soil is not lost. It is still there, still fertile, still producing. What we lost was not the artifact, but the understanding, not the product, but the process, not the technology, but the worldview that created it. Modern science asks, how do we recreate Terra Preta? The deeper question is, how do we become people who would create it? Terra Preta required patience, annual additions maintained across lifetimes, building fertility your grandchildren would benefit from. It required observation, learning ecosystem patterns too subtle for casual notice. It required humility, working with natural processes rather than dominating them. It required community, knowledge systems maintained collectively because no individual could hold it all. These are not technical challenges, they are philosophical ones. We live in an era of immediate returns, quarterly profits, solutions purchasable with sufficient capital. Terra Preta suggests a different measure of success. Soil that improves over centuries, forests that feed communities for generations, knowledge passed through teaching rather than purchased through transactions. This seems impractical until you consider the alternative. Industrial agriculture depletes soil, requires escalating chemical inputs, and contributes to climate change while remaining vulnerable to it. It feeds billions today while undermining the capacity to feed anyone tomorrow. By contrast, Terra Preta's philosophy, building rather than extracting, investing in future fertility rather than maximizing present yields, offers sustainability industrial models cannot match. The revival of Terra Preta is not about nostalgia. It is not about returning to the past. It is about recovering wisdom that transcends the particular time and place that generated it. Ancient Amazonians did not have our technology. They had something potentially more valuable, accumulated knowledge about building living systems that sustain themselves. That knowledge, fragments recovered and principles reconstructed, is spreading. Not as imposition, but as option. Not as single solution, but as demonstration that other approaches exist. Every biochar kiln built, every degraded hectare restored, every community learning to build rather than deplete their soil represents recovery of possibility. Perhaps the most profound lesson Terra Preta offers is this: what we build into the earth persists. Long after cultures collapse, long after knowledge systems fragment, long after we ourselves are forgotten, what we put into the ground remains. The question is what we choose to leave. The builders of Terra Preta left fertility, soil that still gives 2,000 years later. What are we leaving? Soil exhausted within decades? Land stripped and abandoned? Or are we beginning, finally, to learn from the earth that teaches us everything we lost is recoverable? Knowledge does not vanish. It waits, encoded in earth itself, in microorganisms that remember what we forgot, in soil that knows how to regenerate if we allow it. The wisdom is not lost. We are simply relearning how to listen. Terra Preta reminds us that the future is not only about what we discover. Sometimes it is about what we recover. Sometimes progress means recognizing that ancient people, working with what they had, solved problems we are still struggling to understand. The dark earth endures. The question is whether we will prove wise enough to learn from it. Knowledge buried in earth can be recovered. Wisdom written in soil can be read again. The past still teaches for those willing to learn. This is Ancient Nature Archives, rediscovering what time tried to bury. Subscribe to continue this journey through forgotten ecological knowledge, lost systems, and ancient wisdom that could reshape our future. The dark earth waits. What will we learn from it?